Her mother stole the billionaire she loved, so Carol stole something bigger. She stole the truth, weaponized it, and detonated it at the one place Celeste Santos felt untouchable, a charity gala podium where she was performing philanthropy in stolen diamonds. Carol Santos didn't scream when she found Ethan Grayson in bed with her mother in the house she'd spent 3 months turning into their home. She just disappeared, built an empire in 4 months, then walked back into his foundation's boardroom with evidence that Celeste had been systematically draining millions while playing the concerned mother role. But here's what shocked everyone. Carol didn't just expose the embezzlement at the gala that night. She did it while simultaneously clearing Ethan's name, protecting the children's programs her mother tried to gut, and proving that sometimes the most devastating revenge isn't destruction, it's saving the people who hurt you and forcing them to watch you choose integrity over their comfortable lies, which is why when Celeste screamed, "You destroyed your family for pride," Carol's response was only 8 words long, and it changed. "Hello, my dearest family. You're my reason to smile, my joy every day. I love you endlessly. May heaven fill your heart with peace and your life with blessings. May each day bring love, strength, and grace your way. You are loved, cherished, and never forgotten. Thank you for your amazing support. We are one strong family. Comment where you're watching from." The evening light filtered through windows she'd personally selected, casting gold across floors she'd chosen, illuminating the jasmine she'd planted to replace the roses his late wife had loved. And mixing with it, so subtle she almost missed it, was the unmistakable scent of her mother's perfume. Celeste's signature Chanel, the one Carol had coveted as a child, back when she still believed her mother's choices were aspirational instead of cautionary. Carol smiled faintly. Her estranged mother must have finally come to see her daughter's success, maybe even to apologize for the years of conditional love and weaponized disappointment. She set down the fabric samples on the console table, the ones she'd restored from Ethan's grandmother's estate, and called out gently, voice echoing through rooms she'd made warm. "Mom, Ethan, I'm back early." No response, just the faint hum of the air conditioning and something else. Something that made her pulse quicken without understanding why showing. That's when she heard it, a sound she couldn't mistake. Wouldn't want to mistake, except her mind was already trying to rationalize it away. Maybe a movie playing upstairs. Maybe the old house settling. Maybe her imagination turning innocent sounds into nightmare fuel because she'd spent her entire childhood waiting for her mother to destroy something precious. But Carol's instincts, honed by years of reading Celeste's moods, of predicting when affection would curdle into criticism, screamed that this was different. Muffled laughter, intimate, familiar in ways that made her skin crawl. A low voice, Ethan's voice, saying something Carol couldn't make out but recognized in her bones. And beneath it, unmistakable, the rhythmic creak of the bed she'd chosen. In the room she'd designed, in the house that was supposed to be their beginning. Carol's hands went numb. The fabric samples she was still holding slipped from her grip, scattering across marble like confetti at a funeral. Each step she took toward the staircase felt like walking toward the end of everything. Her heels clicked too loud, announcing her presence, giving them time to stop, to hide, to pretend. Part of her wanted to turn around, to walk back out the door, get in her car, and preserve the illusion that her life wasn't about to shatter into pieces too small to ever reassemble. But she'd spent 28 years running from her mother's truth. She wasn't running anymore. The master bedroom door was half open, the same door she'd refinished herself, choosing brass fixtures that caught afternoon light. Her hand trembled as she reached for it, fingers hovering in the space between ignorance and confirmation. She pushed it open gently. The sight inside didn't just freeze her. It rewrote her. Ethan, the man who'd held her through panic attacks about her mother's return, who'd promised, "I see you, Carol, not your history," tangled in sheets with Celeste. Her mother. The woman who'd called Carol's design work cute hobby for someone with your background. The woman who'd disappeared for 5 years and returned 3 months ago claiming she wanted to rebuild their relationship. For a second, the room tilted on an axis Carol couldn't name. Physics stopped working. Time became elastic. Her knees weakened. But she caught herself on the doorframe, the same doorframe she'd painted cream to make the room feel like hope instead of grief. The sound of their bodies, skin on skin, breath mixing with breath. The sight of their hands, his fingers tangled in her mother's hair. The same hands that had traced Carol's spine just this morning and whispered, "You were the first person who's felt like home." It was real. No misunderstanding, no accident, no way to explain this away with euphemisms or apologies. Carol's breath caught somewhere between her lungs and throat. She couldn't scream, couldn't make sound at all. What escaped was something small and broken, halfway between a gasp and the death of every belief she'd ever held about people deserving second chances. Ethan's head jerked up, eyes wide, mouth forming her name like an accusation he was leveling at himself. Celeste turned, and for one crystalline moment, Carol saw something flicker across her mother's face. Not shame, not remorse, but the particular satisfaction of someone who'd just proven a point they'd been making for years. Everyone can be bought. Everyone has a price. Even him. Three pairs of eyes locked in a moment that stretched into eternity. Carol's disbelief, Ethan's horror, Celeste's calculated composure already morphing into performative regret. The only words that came out of Carol's trembling lips were factual, broken, undeniable. "You two?" Silence swallowed the rest. Then her voice rose, raw and shattered, scraping her throat like broken glass. "In my house, in the bed I chose, in the room I designed for us." Her words sliced through the air with surgical precision, each syllable a weapon she hadn't known she could wield. Ethan scrambled for the sheet like a guilty child caught mid-theft, voice cracking with desperation that sounded like theater now, like performance. "Carol, wait, I can explain. This isn't—" "Explain what?" she snapped, voice trembling but sharp enough to draw blood. "How you ended up inside the woman who gave birth to me. Please, Ethan, walk me through the logistics. I'm fascinated." The words hit him like a physical blow. He flinched. Actually flinched. Celeste gasped, performed a gasp, really, clutching the blanket tighter around her body, stammering with the particular practiced helplessness Carol recognized from childhood. "Baby, it's not. This isn't what it looks like. We were just—" Carol laughed. The sound carried more pain than humor, more knowledge than innocence. "Not what it looks like. Mother, I can literally see what it looks like. Do you think I'm blind or just stupid enough to believe whatever lie you're crafting right now?" Ethan took a step forward, sheet wrapped around his waist, hands up in surrender. "Carol, please. It was a mistake. I swear to God, it just happened. I don't know how." Carol's eyes locked onto his, brimming with tears but burning with the particular clarity that comes from having every illusion stripped away simultaneously. "It just happened? You just happened to sleep with the woman who spent my childhood teaching me that love was something you bought, not something you earned? You think that just happens, Ethan? Like tripping? Like accidentally dialing a number?" He fell silent, his mouth opened. No words came out. Because there were no words, no explanation that wouldn't sound like exactly what it was, a choice. Celeste's eyes darted between them, frantic now, the performance shifting gears. "Sweetheart, please. I don't know what came over me. I was lonely. He was grieving. We were both vulnerable and I—" Carol snapped her head toward her mister, expression hardening into something Celeste had never seen before. Not the desperate for approval daughter, not the woman who'd spent 28 years trying to earn conditional love, but someone who'd just stopped caring about being good enough for people who'd never deserved her effort. "You don't know what came over you?" Carol's voice was ice. "You came over to my house, to my bedroom, to the bed I share with my partner. And you did this. Don't perform confusion, Mother. You've never been confused a day in your life. You calculated this the moment you realized I was happy." The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Ethan's face had gone pale, guilt written across every feature in a language Carol could read perfectly now, the same face he'd made when talking about his late wife's accident. The same expression of, "I knew this would hurt someone and I did it anyway." Celeste broke into sobs, theatrical, perfectly calibrated to trigger Carol's lifetime of programming to comfort her mother above all else. Simone, please don't look at me like that. I was weak. I made a terrible mistake. Please, baby, I'm still your mother. Carol's lips trembled, but her tone grew colder with each word. Weak? No, Mom. Weak is eating dessert when you're trying to lose weight. Weak is showing up late because traffic was bad. This, she gestured toward the bed with hands that shook, not from fear, but from the sheer force of rage she was containing. This is betrayal, the kind people write about in books because it's too savage for real life. The kind that doesn't get forgiven. It gets documented. For a moment, all Carol could hear was the pounding of her own heart. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Every memory, every late-night conversation with Ethan about trust and vulnerability, every childhood moment where Celeste had chosen status over her daughter, every time she'd believed people could change, suddenly felt like poison she'd been drinking willingly. Every laugh, every I love you, every promise, all of it recontextualized in a single image. Ethan tried again, stepping forward, voice breaking with what sounded like genuine anguish, but felt like manipulation now. Carol, I love you. I messed up. I messed up worse than I've ever messed up anything, but it doesn't change that I love you. Please, let me. She recoiled as if his words were filth, as if love itself had become contaminated. Don't say you love me. Don't you dare use that word right now. Love doesn't betray. Love doesn't destroy. Love doesn't, her voice cracked. Love doesn't crawl into bed with your partner's mother because you were vulnerable and lonely. Love either has integrity or it's just another transaction my mother taught you to make. The words silenced him completely. Because what could he say? What defense existed that didn't sound like exactly what it was? Choosing comfort over commitment. Choosing available intimacy over earned trust. Choosing Celeste's practiced seduction over Carol's honest love. Carol looked between them, these two people who'd shaped her entire world in different ways, who'd both promised her something better than she'd known, who'd both proven that promises were just words people used when the truth was too expensive. I'm leaving, she said, voice steady now empty, the kind of calm that comes after crying stops working. Don't follow me. Don't call. Don't send flowers or apologies or explanations. This, she gestured around the room she'd designed to be their sanctuary. This is the end, not a fight, not a break, the end. Ethan started toward her. Carol, please, stop. The single word carried enough finality to freeze him mid-step. I said don't follow me, and I meant it. The only thing worse than what you did would be watching you pretend you didn't choose it. She turned and walked out of the bedroom, not running, not crying yet, just moving with the mechanical precision of someone whose body was handling what her mind couldn't process. Down the stairs she'd restored, past the foyer she'd designed, through the door she'd chosen because it looked like an entrance to possibility, not just a house. She got in her car, the modest sedan parked next to Ethan's luxury vehicles, and drove. She didn't know where, didn't care, just drove until the estate disappeared in her rearview mirror, until the jasmine she'd planted couldn't reach her anymore, until the life she'd been building became small enough that maybe eventually she could forget how much she'd believed in it. But she couldn't forget. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Maybe not ever. Because some betrayals don't just break your heart. They rewrite your history, making every happy memory a lie you didn't know you were living. Carol drove until the city lights blurred into watercolor through her tears, until the estate became a distant memory her mind kept trying to revise into something survivable. She pulled into a rest stop somewhere off the highway, hands shaking too hard to grip the steering wheel anymore, and finally let herself shatter in the privacy of her modest sedan. But braking wasn't a luxury she could afford for long. By dawn, she'd need a plan. By morning, she'd need to decide whether to vanish or fight. For now, she just needed to remember how she'd gotten here, how hope had felt before her mother poisoned it. 3 months earlier, Celeste Santos arrived on a Tuesday afternoon without warning, standing on Carol's apartment doorstep wearing designer sunglasses that couldn't quite hide the desperation aging had carved into her once flawless face. She looked smaller than Carol remembered, less like the glamorous socialite who'd chosen country club memberships over parent-teacher conferences, and more like someone who'd finally run out of people willing to fund her lifestyle. "Hello, baby," Celeste said, voice carrying that particular practiced warmth Carol had learned to distrust by age 12. "I know I should have called, but I was afraid you'd say no." Carol stood in the doorway of her small apartment, the one she'd furnished with thrift store finds, and painted herself because contractors were expensive and pride was cheaper, staring at the woman who'd taught her that love was something you earned through achievement, not something you received simply for existing. "What do you want?" Carol asked, not bothering with pretense. Celeste's smile faltered, genuine hurt flickering across her face for just a moment before the performance resumed. "I want to make amends. I know I wasn't. I know I made mistakes when you were growing up. But I'm trying to change, to be better, to finally be the mother you deserved." Carol wanted to slam the door, wanted to tell her mother that 28 years of conditional love couldn't be erased by one apology delivered with the same false sweetness Celeste used when asking wealthy men for favors. But somewhere beneath the scar tissue, the little girl who'd spent her childhood waiting for her mother to choose her, just once, stirred awake. "One coffee," Carol said finally, "then we'll see." She let her mother in, not knowing she'd just opened the door to her own destruction. Over the next 3 weeks, Celeste played her role perfectly. She asked about Carol's work with genuine seeming interest, complimented her designs without the usual barbs about making the best of limited resources, even helped Carol organize fabric samples for the Grayson project, staying late into evenings, acting like the supportive mother Carol had always imagined having. "This estate project," Celeste said one night, holding up Carol's sketches with what looked like pride. "It's your breakthrough, isn't it? The client must trust you enormously." "He's been surprisingly wonderful," Carol admitted, not noticing the way her mother's expression sharpened with interest. "His wife died 2 years ago. The house became a mausoleum. He wants it to feel like home again." "How sad," Celeste murmured, but her eyes were calculating. "And lonely, I imagine. A billionaire grieving in that big house." Carol missed the predatory edge in her mother's sympathy, too focused on her own growing feelings for Ethan, feelings she was terrified to name because naming them meant risking the kind of rejection she'd spent a lifetime collecting. The gala invitation arrived on a Thursday evening, hand-delivered by Ethan's assistant along with a note in his elegant handwriting. "Carol, the foundation is hosting a charity event Saturday. I'm required to attend, which usually means 3 hours of performing interest in conversations that bore me senseless. But if you came, I might actually enjoy it. No pressure, just consider it." Ethan Carol read the note 3 times, pulse quickening with each pass. She texted back immediately. "I'm a designer, not a socialite. I don't even own a gala-appropriate dress." His response came 30 seconds later. "Good. I'm tired of people who perform elegance. I'd rather be with someone who just is." She stared at her phone, something warm and terrifying blooming in her chest. She typed and deleted 5 different responses before settling on, "I don't think that's a good idea." Her phone rang. Ethan's name lit up the screen. "Why not?" he asked when she answered, voice soft enough to feel intimate even through the phone. "Because—" Carol stopped. Tried again. "Because you're my client. Because there are boundaries. Because I'm not. Because you're afraid," Ethan finished gently. "I know, I am too. I haven't felt anything real since Sarah died. Didn't want to. Built walls so high I forgot what it was like to exist without them. Then you walked into my house with sketches drawn by hand because you couldn't afford software, and you looked at rooms everyone else called tragic and saw a possibility instead. You made me remember what hope feels like. That terrifies me. But not as much as the idea of going back to existing without it." Carol's breath caught. "Ethan, to come to the gala, not as my designer, just as someone I want to spend time with, someone I haven't smiled around in years." He paused. "Please." She said yes before courage could abandon her. The gala was held at the Grandstone Hotel, where chandeliers cost more than Carol's annual salary, and every conversation carried the particular weight of people whose decisions moved markets. Carol wore a simple navy dress she'd found at a consignment shop, elegant but modest, expensive-looking but not showy, and felt wildly out of place until Ethan appeared at her elbow, looking at her like she was the only person in the room worth seeing. You look perfect, he said quietly. I look like I'm pretending to belong here. Good. Everyone else here is pretending too. You're just honest about it. They moved through the evening together, Ethan introducing her as the brilliant designer who's transforming the estate. Carol gradually relaxing as she realized the wealth in this room couldn't touch the connection growing between them. When he laughed at something she said about architects having God complexes with CAD software, photographers captured the moment, the reclusive billionaire smiling genuinely for the first time since his wife's death. Near midnight, they stood on the hotel terrace overlooking the city, champagne forgotten in their hands, talking about everything except the feelings making the air between them electric. I should tell you something, Carol said, gathering courage. My mother's back in my life after 5 years. She says she wants to make amends, but I don't. I don't trust her. She's never done anything without calculating the benefit first. Ethan turned to face her fully. Then why let her in? Because I'm tired of being angry, tired of letting her absence define me. Carol looked at him. And maybe because I'm learning from you that people can change. That grief doesn't have to be permanent. That homes can be rebuilt. He reached for her hand, fingers interlacing, with the inevitability of things that should have happened sooner. You're rebuilding more than my house, Carol. I hope you know that. She did, and it terrified her. The tabloids ran the photos Monday morning. Billionaire Ethan Grayson smiles again. Who is the mystery woman? The article speculated about romance, about whether the young designer was helping him heal, about whether this meant the reclusive investor was finally ready to rejoin society. Carol saw the headlines and felt exposed. But Ethan called that afternoon and said, let them speculate. I'm tired of hiding from living. Aren't you? She was. God, she was. Across town in the apartment Carol had been paying for without knowing her mother had nowhere else to go, Celeste Santos sat with a glass of wine and Monday's tabloid spread across her lap. She studied the photos with the particular intensity of someone seeing opportunity where others saw romance. The man in the pictures, Ethan Grayson, billionaire widower, her daughter's apparent love interest, looked older than when she'd known him. But the eyes were the same. That particular shade of gray-blue she'd memorized during 3 months of secret meetings 15 years ago. Back when he'd been a rising investor and she'd been a socialite willing to trade anything for access to wealth. They'd ended things before his engagement to Sarah. Clean break, no drama, just a mutual understanding that what they'd had was transaction, not love. But now, seeing him with her daughter, seeing the way he looked at Carol was something that resembled actual feeling. Celeste felt something stir. Not jealousy exactly. Something more calculating. Her daughter had found herself a billionaire who actually cared. A man grieving and vulnerable and desperately lonely. A man Celeste knew how to manipulate because she'd done it before. Carol was building a future. And Celeste, broke, aging, running out of time and options, needed that future more than her daughter did. She poured another glass of wine and began planning how to take it. Celeste orchestrated the coincidence with the precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime engineering opportunities from other people's vulnerabilities. She arrived at the Grayson estate on a Thursday afternoon, claiming she'd been driving past and noticed Ethan's car, thought she'd stop to see the progress Carol had made, hoped it wasn't intrusive. Ethan, polite, grieving, lonely in ways he'd learned to hide, invited her in for coffee. You've probably forgotten, Celeste said, studying him over her cup with calculated casualness. But we met once, years ago, before you married Sarah, just briefly. Ethan's expression shifted, recognition dawning with visible discomfort. Celeste, yes, I remember. That was a lifetime ago, she finished smoothly. Different people, different circumstances. I'd actually forgotten myself until I saw your photos in the paper with Carol. Funny how fate works, isn't it? My daughter renovating your home, you helping her build a career. It's almost like we were always meant to circle back to each other. The implication hung there, not quite accusation, not quite invitation, just suggestion planted like a seed in soil Celeste knew was fertile with guilt and loneliness. Over the next 2 weeks, Celeste found reasons to visit the estate, bringing Carol lunch she'd made too much of, dropping off fabric samples Carol had forgotten. Each visit engineered to coincide with moments Ethan was there alone, each conversation carefully designed to erode the walls he'd built around his grief. She listened with practiced sympathy when he talked about Sarah's accident, offered gentle observations about Carol's ambitious streak that sounded like concern but planted doubt, whispered that people from modest backgrounds sometimes saw wealth as opportunity rather than responsibility. "I'm not saying Carol doesn't care about you," Celeste said one evening, voice dripping with maternal worry. "I'm just saying, as someone who raised her, she's always been calculating, strategic. She learned that from me, I suppose. But with you, I worry she sees the estate, the foundation, the life you could give her, and mistakes that for love." Ethan wanted to defend Carol, wanted to reject Celeste's poisonous insinuations, but guilt made him vulnerable. Guilt over his past with Celeste, guilt over developing feelings for her daughter, guilt over betraying Sarah's memory by wanting someone new. The night it happened, Ethan had been drinking. Not enough to excuse what came next, but enough to quiet the voice screaming that this was wrong. Celeste appeared at his door wearing something that reminded him of their past, speaking in tones that made loneliness feel like fate instead of choice. "You're grieving," she whispered. "You're allowed to need comfort. Carol doesn't have to know. No one does. Just let me help you feel less alone." He should have said no, should have called Carol, confessed his moment of weakness before it became betrayal, should have remembered that Celeste had spent 28 years teaching her daughter that love was conditional and trust was a weapon. Instead, he let her stay. Carol arrived early with sketches for the nursery, the room Ethan wanted to build for the family we'll create someday. She'd spent hours perfecting the design, choosing colors that represented hope instead of loss, faces that invited life instead of mourning grief. She climbed the stairs, calling out cheerfully, "Ethan, I know I'm early, but I couldn't wait to show you these designs. I think you're going to—" Her voice died. Through the half-open door of the master bedroom, the room she'd redesigned with him, where they'd shared their first kiss just last week, she saw them. Her mother, the woman who'd given birth to her, who'd taught her that love was something you earned through achievement, who'd returned 3 months ago claiming she wanted to make amends. In bed with Ethan. The man who'd made Carol believe she deserved to be chosen, who'd looked at her designs and seen beauty, who'd whispered, "You make me want to hope again." Just days ago, the world didn't explode, it went silent. Time stopped working. Physics abandoned her. The sketches slipped from her hands, papers scattering across the floor like evidence at a crime scene. Her throat closed, her legs trembled, threatening collapse. She couldn't scream, couldn't make sound at all. What came out was something small and broken, a noise that belonged to the child she'd been, the one who'd spent years waiting for her mother to choose her and finally understanding she never would. Celeste gasped, performed a gasp really, eyes wide with theatrical shock. Ethan turned, his face draining of color, horror written across features Carol had memorized in detail, had sketched from memory, had dreamed about. 3 faces froze in one moment of unbearable truth. Carol couldn't move, couldn't process, couldn't reconcile the image in front of her with the reality she'd been building for 3 months. Ethan scrambled for words. "Carol, wait." But there were no words. No explanation that wouldn't sound like exactly what it was. A choice. A betrayal. The end of everything she'd been brave enough to believe in. Carol turned and ran, not walked, ran, downstairs she'd restored with her own hands, through rooms she'd filled with hope, out the door she'd chosen because it looked like an entrance to possibility. She got in her car and drove, vision blurred with tears, hands shaking so hard she could barely grip the wheel. Heartbreaking in ways she didn't know were possible until the moment you realized that trust was just another fairy tale adults tell children before teaching them the truth. Behind her in the bedroom, Celeste smiled. Chapter 4. The vanishing Carol disappeared with the thoroughness of someone who'd spent her life making herself small enough not to bother people. She turned off her phone, abandoned her apartment with only essentials, left no forwarding address. The design firm she'd been building got a 1-sentence email. "Family emergency. Indefinite leave. Don't contact me." For Ethan, the silence was torture. He called 200 times. Left voicemails that went from desperate apology to pleading explanation to finally just, please let me know you're alive. Hired a private investigator who found nothing. Carol had gone off grid with the precision of someone who knew exactly how to vanish. The media, smelling scandal, swarmed. Billionaire's designer girlfriend vanishes after mysterious falling out. The headlines were brutal, speculative, invasive. And Celeste, brilliant calculating Celeste, fed the narrative with surgical precision. Carol's always been fragile, she told a sympathetic journalist over lunch. Brilliant but unstable. I think the pressure of dating someone like Ethan became too much. She's probably somewhere trying to find herself. You know how artists are. To Ethan privately, she was gentler. I think she realized you were using her to get over Sarah. She's protecting herself. Maybe it's for the best. You deserve someone who understands your world. Guilt consumed Ethan like infection. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't function. His foundation board threatened intervention. Investors questioned his judgment. The empire he'd built through precision and control began showing cracks. Let me help, Celeste offered, voice dripping with maternal concern. I know Carol hurt you, but the foundation's work is too important. Let me oversee the Children's Wing project. Consider it my apology for what happened, for my part in it. Ethan, drowning in self-loathing and desperate to prove he still cared about something beyond his own destruction, signed over partial control. Not because he trusted Celeste, but because punishing himself felt like the only honest thing left to do. What he didn't know, Celeste had been planning this for weeks, had already established shell companies, fake vendors, routing systems designed to drain the foundation's funds while looking like legitimate expenses. Within a month, she'd embezzled $200,000. Within 2 months, $500,000. By month 3, she'd stolen enough to secure the wealthy lifestyle she'd been chasing her entire life. And Ethan, broken, isolated, barely functional, noticed nothing. Weeks turned into months. The media moved on to fresher scandals. Ethan's foundation continued its work, though diminished. He moved through days like a ghost in his own life, performing the routines of living without actually participating. Then, on a Tuesday morning 4 months after Carol's disappearance, his assistant brought him the business section with a sticky note, thought you should see this. The headline read, Santos in Slate Interiors wins prestigious contract to restore Grayson Foundation, Children's Wing. Below it, a photo, Carol, hair shorter, expression sharper, wearing a power suit that looked nothing like the modest clothes she'd worn before, standing beside a woman identified as Lena Ortiz, co-founder. The article detailed their meteoric rise. Santos and Slate has quickly become known for transforming institutional spaces into welcoming environments. Their proposal for the Grayson Foundation renovation focuses on reclaiming spaces that were corrupted by greed and restoring them to their intended purpose. A mission statement with particularly pointed resonance given the foundation's recent financial irregularities. Ethan read it 3 times, pulse racing, hands trembling. She was alive. She'd survived. She'd built something new from the wreckage he'd helped create. And she was coming back. Not for him, for the foundation. For the children's wing she'd designed before everything shattered. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday. Ethan spent 3 days preparing for a confrontation he both desperately wanted and absolutely dreaded, knowing that when he saw Carol again, he'd have to face not just what he'd done, but who he'd allowed himself to become. Chapter 5, The Return. The boardroom felt different when Carol walked in. Same mahogany table, same floor-to-ceiling windows, but the air pressure had changed, made heavier by the weight of 4 months and 1,000 unspoken words. She entered with Lena beside her, both wearing confidence like armor, carrying leather portfolios, and the particular composure of people who'd learned to weaponize professionalism. Ethan's breath caught when he saw her. She looked stronger, sharper. The softness that had first drawn him, replaced by edges he'd helped create. Their eyes met across the table. Time didn't stop, it just slowed enough for him to catalog everything. The way she held her spine straighter, the way her gaze didn't waver, the way she looked at him like a stranger she'd once known instead of someone who'd destroyed her. Miss Santos, the board chair said, welcome, we're eager to hear your proposal. Carol's presentation was flawless. Slides showing the children's wing transformed from institutional sterility into spaces that invited play and healing. Budget breakdowns that highlighted cost efficiency, timelines that promised completion ahead of schedule. But beneath the professionalism, Ethan heard her real message. I came to finish what I started before you broke it. After the board approved the contract unanimously, after everyone else had filed out congratulating Carol on her impressive pitch, Ethan and Carol stood alone in the empty boardroom. You came back, he said quietly, voice rough from months of barely speaking. I came to finish what I started, she answered, tone neutral but eyes burning with something that looked like controlled fury. Carol, he stopped. What could he say? What apology existed that wouldn't sound like insult after injury? Don't, she held up one hand. I'm not here to relitigate what happened. I'm here to restore a children's wing that deserves better than being collateral damage in my mother's schemes. Your mother's schemes? Ethan's confusion was genuine. Carol's laugh was bitter. You really don't know, do you? You signed over foundation control to her 4 months ago. You've been so busy drowning in guilt, you never noticed she's been draining it dry. She pulled a folder from her portfolio, slid it across the table. Inside, financial documents, vendor contracts with suspicious signatures, routing numbers that led to shell companies, payment approvals signed by Celeste Santos. Ethan stared at the evidence, horror dawning. She's been stealing. Yes, systematically, with impressive efficiency. Carol's voice stayed level. I spent 4 months building a company and investigating my mother simultaneously. Turns out she's been planning this since before she returned to my life. Saw me with you, recognized opportunity, executed perfectly. Why? Ethan looked up at her. Why are you showing me this? You could have gone to the police, destroyed me publicly. Why give me the evidence? Carol met his eyes. Because despite what you did, despite how you broke me, I know my mother manipulated you. Used your grief, your guilt, your loneliness. That doesn't excuse your choice. Nothing excuses that. But I'm not interested in destroying you, Ethan. I'm interested in saving what she corrupted. Behind them, the door opened. Lena entered with a man in an IT security uniform. This is Marcus Chen, Carol said. He's been auditing your systems. He found the rest. Marcus opened his laptop, displayed files that showed the full scope of Celeste's fraud, fake vendors, embezzled funds, forged contracts, nearly $2 million stolen over 4 months. Ethan's face went ashen. How did I not? Because you were too busy hating yourself to notice you were being robbed. Carol's voice softened slightly. And because she's been doing this her whole life, I just finally learned to see it. What do we do? We? Carol's eyebrow raised. You go to your lawyers? You file reports? You begin damage control? I finished the children's wing renovation with funds secured from donors who aren't criminals. And we? She gestured between them. We maintain professional distance while I complete this contract. Carol, don't ask me to forgive you, not yet, maybe not ever. She started toward the door, paused. But I won't let my mother destroy something good just because you were weak enough to let her. Children deserve better. The foundation deserves better. And you? Ethan asked quietly. What do you deserve? Carol looked back at him, expression unreadable. I deserve to finish what I started and rebuild myself from what you both destroyed. That's enough for now. She left, taking Lena and Marcus with her, leaving Ethan alone with evidence of betrayal layered upon betrayal and the crushing understanding that Carol's strength came from surviving something he'd helped create. Chapter 6. The Trap. Celeste saw the trap closing before anyone else. She'd spent a lifetime reading Prey, calculating exits, preparing contingencies. When Ethan's lawyer called requesting a meeting about financial irregularities, she knew her time was running out. So she did what she'd always done. Attacked first. The forged emails were masterpieces of manipulation. Carol's name on vendor approvals, her digital signature on fund transfers, her email address, cleverly spoofed, confirming payments to shell companies. Celeste leaked them to 3 journalists simultaneously, each receiving a carefully curated packet suggesting Carol Santos had been embezzling from the Grayson Foundation while pretending to investigate her mother. The headlines hit like grenades: designer accused of fraud, and Carol Santos, victim or con artist. The story spread with viral velocity, Carol's face plastered across news sites. Her company's reputation destroyed overnight, clients canceling contracts before investigations even began. Lena called at 2 a.m., voice shaking. "Carol, they're camped outside your apartment. Reporters, police want to question you. I know." Carol's voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that came from expecting exactly this betrayal. She played her last card. Now we play ours. The confrontation happened in Carol's apartment, neutral territory where Celeste couldn't control the narrative. Carol had Lena there as witness. Marcus recording on hidden camera. Everything documented. Celeste entered with practiced confidence, designer sunglasses hiding eyes that had learned decades ago not to reveal strategy. "Baby, I came as soon as I heard. These allegations are ridiculous. I told the lawyers." "Stop." Carol's voice was ice. "Stop performing. It's just us now. You can drop the act." Celeste's smile tightened. "I don't know what you forged those emails, used my credentials that you copied when you were helping with my work, created fake trails that pointed to me instead of you." Carol pulled out her own folder, not the one she'd shown Ethan, but a different one, thicker, more damning. "But you made one mistake. You taught me to be careful, to always have backup, to never trust anyone, not even family." She spread documents across her coffee table, timestamp backups showing the original transactions, IP addresses proving the emails came from Celeste's devices, security footage of Celeste accessing Carol's laptop when she thought her daughter was sleeping. Celeste's composure cracked. Just slightly, just enough. "You recorded me? Your own mother?" "I documented a criminal." Carol's voice stayed steady. "Because I knew you'd do this. Knew you'd try to destroy me rather than accept consequences. You've spent my entire life teaching me that love is weakness and trust is stupid. Congratulations. I finally learned." Celeste's mask fell completely, replaced by cold calculation. "You think you've won? Carol, I built you. Every opportunity you have exists because I gave birth to you. Every skill you possess came from watching me navigate the world. You'll always be standing in my shadow, playing with rules I wrote." "No." Carol stood and, for the first time in her life, looked down at her mother without flinching. "Not this time. This time I'm stepping into my own light. And you're going to prison for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Not because I'm vengeful, but because I'm finally brave enough to stop protecting people who hurt me." Celeste laughed, bitter, broken. "You'll regret this. When I'm gone, when you're alone with your precious integrity and empty bed, you'll wish you'd chosen differently." "Maybe." Carol opened her door. "But I'd rather be alone with integrity than surrounded by people who love me conditionally. You taught me that too. Just not the lesson you intended." Celeste left without another word, designer heels clicking against tile like countdown to inevitability. After the door closed, Carol collapsed into Lena's arms, finally letting herself shake. "You okay?" Lena whispered. "No, but I will be." Carol straightened, wiped her eyes. "Is Marcus ready?" "Everything's compiled. Documentation, video evidence, financial forensics." "When you give the word—" "Not yet." Carol looked at the folder containing proof of her mother's crimes. "One more week. Let her think she's winning. Let Ethan face this truth himself. Then we end it publicly." "Why wait?" "Because exposure shouldn't feel like revenge. It should feel like justice." Carol smiled faintly. "And justice requires perfect timing." Chapter 7. The Public Reckoning. The charity gala was held at the same hotel where Carol and Ethan had first appeared publicly together 6 months earlier. Same chandeliers, same wealthy donors, different everything else. The foundation's annual event, designed to celebrate achievements and secure future funding, had become this year's stage for something much darker. Celeste stood at the podium wearing cream silk and diamond earrings stolen from foundation funds. delivering a speech written to position herself as the martyred philanthropist holding the organization together despite recent challenges. Family and legacy, she said, voice carrying practiced emotion. These are the foundations, no pun intended, polite laughter, upon which all meaningful work is built. My daughter taught me that, actually. She showed me that sometimes the people we love most are the ones who challenge us to be better. In the back of the ballroom, Carol stood beside Lena, watching her mother perform with the skill of someone who'd spent a lifetime lying beautifully. Now, Lena whispered. Now, Carol confirmed. She walked to the stage with the calm of someone who'd already won, who'd spent a week preparing this moment with legal precision and emotional discipline. Celeste saw her daughter approaching and smiled, actually smiled, believing Carol had come to play the dutiful daughter role one final time. Carol took the microphone gently. Thank you, Mother, that was beautiful. Almost poetic, but I think the donors deserve to hear the whole story about family and legacy. Confusion flickered across Celeste's face. Carol, sweetheart, this isn't... The time? You're right. This should have happened months ago. Carol nodded to Marcus, who was operating the presentation screen. But better late than never. The screen behind them illuminated with bank transfers, vendor contracts, forged signatures, each document labeled with dates and amounts, creating an undeniable timeline of systematic theft. Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Donors leaned forward, phones emerging to capture evidence. For 6 months, Carol said, voice steady, my mother has been embezzling from the Grayson Foundation. Nearly $2 million stolen through fake vendors, falsified contracts, and signature fraud. She used her position as my mother and her relationship with Mr. Grayson to gain access, then systematically drained funds meant for children's programs. That's a lie. Celeste's composure shattered like glass. She's making this up because I exposed her fraud. She's the one who documented everything. Carol pulled out a flash drive. These records include security footage of you accessing restricted financial systems, emails from your personal account coordinating with shell companies, and bank deposits to accounts registered in your name. She looked at her mother directly. You taught me to always have proof. I just never expected to use that lesson against you. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Board members huddled. Lawyers materialized from corners. Celeste's face twisted with fury. You ungrateful! I gave you everything. I gave you life. And this is how you repay me? By destroying your family for pride? You destroyed this family when you sold love for profit, Carol answered, voice soft but caring. When you taught me that people were transactions. When you looked at your daughter's happiness and saw opportunity for theft. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just finally showing people the receipts. Security began moving toward the stage. Celeste saw them coming, realized the trap had closed completely. You'll regret this, she hissed at Carol. When you're alone, when he leaves you again, when you realize integrity doesn't keep you warm at night, I'll still have chosen truth over comfortable lies, Carol finished. And that will be enough. They escorted Celeste away, her protest fading as ballroom doors closed. The room erupted in chaos, reporters shouting questions, board members demanding explanations, donors calculating whether to flee or stay. Through it all, Carol stood at the podium, hands steady, eyes dry, feeling not triumph, but exhausted relief. Then Ethan appeared beside her, didn't speak, just stood there in silent solidarity, his presence saying what words couldn't. This time, I'm not running. This time, I'm standing with you. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning. Chapter 8, The Emotional Confrontation. Carol found him hours later in the newly renovated children's wing, the space where everything had started, where she'd first shown him her designs, and he'd said, "You see beauty where everyone else sees grief." The wing was finished now, walls painted in colors that invited joy instead of mourning, windows positioned to catch afternoon light, a mural Carol had painted herself showing a child reaching toward the sun. Ethan stood before that mural, hands in pockets, shoulders carrying weight that seemed heavier than buildings. You came, he said without turning. I came to see if the work survived the scandal. Carol moved to stand beside him, close but not touching, both of them staring at painted hope, and to make sure you understood something. What? That I didn't do this for you. I did it for the children who deserve spaces that feel safe, for the foundation your wife built with actual love instead of my mother's greed, for myself because I needed to prove I could survive her without becoming her. Ethan finally looked at her. You had every reason to destroy me publicly, to let me take the fall alongside her. Why didn't you? Carol was quiet for a long moment. Because destruction isn't justice. Because love, even betrayed, broken love, doesn't seek revenge. It seeks protection. And despite what you did, despite how you shattered me, I couldn't watch you be destroyed for being manipulated by someone who's been manipulating people her entire life. I made a choice, Carol. She didn't force me. You made a terrible choice, Carol agreed, Bambi. But you made it from grief and guilt and loneliness that she weaponized expertly. That doesn't excuse it. It just explains it. And I'm tired of living in a world where every wrong thing requires equal retaliation. Sometimes survival means choosing differently. Ethan's voice broke. I destroyed us. I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me because I was weak and selfish and too broken to see I was being used. Yes. Can you ever? He stopped. Tried again. Is there any chance you could forgive me? Carol turned to face him fully. I don't know. Right now, I'm still learning how to forgive myself for trusting my mother, for believing she'd changed, for being naive enough to think she could love me without calculating the cost. She paused. But maybe someday, maybe after we both learn to exist without expecting easy absolution. He reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Let their fingers intertwine, tentatively, carefully, not romance, but connection. Thank you, he whispered, for saving what I almost destroyed, for being strong enough to protect something bigger than your own hurt. Carol's eyes filled with tears, not from heartbreak this time, but from the exhausting relief of finally releasing weight she'd been carrying. Thank you for standing beside me tonight, for not running when it got hard, for finally choosing truth even when it was terrifying. They stood together under a mural, the child reaching for sun, and both understood this wasn't an ending or a new beginning. It was something harder and more honest. It was two people learning that healing doesn't follow timelines, that forgiveness isn't transactional, that love can survive betrayal if both people choose to rebuild from honesty instead of illusion. What happens now? Ethan asked. Now I finish this project. Now you rebuild the foundation with actual oversight. Now we both learn to exist as people who made mistakes and chose to do better. She squeezed his hand once, and maybe, eventually, we learn whether what we had was strong enough to survive what we did to it. And if it's not, then we'll still be people who chose integrity over comfort, who learned that some loves teach you by breaking you, who rebuilt themselves from ruins. Carol smiled faintly. That's not a tragedy. That's just life. She left him there, hands slipping from his, both of them understanding that some distances required time to cross, and forcing proximity before healing would just create new wounds, vistas. But as Carol walked out of the children's wing, she felt something she hadn't felt since the night her world shattered. Hope. Small. Fragile. But real. Chapter 9. The final choice. 6 months turned winter into spring. Celeste was sentenced to 7 years for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Reduced from 15 because her lawyer convinced a jury she'd been driven to crime by mental illness rather than systematic greed. Carol attended the sentencing, sitting in the back row, watching her mother led away in handcuffs, feeling not triumph but the quiet closure of a wound finally allowed to scar. She visited the prison 3 months later, not because she owed her mother anything, but because leaving words unsaid felt like letting Celeste keep power she didn't deserve. They sat across from each other in a sterile visiting room, separated by table and consequences. You came, Celeste said, wearing orange instead of silk, looking smaller without the armor of expensive clothes. I came for me, not for you. Carol placed a photograph on the table. The finished children's wing, kids playing in spaces designed with love instead of greed. This is what you tried to destroy. This is what survived despite you. Celeste studied the photo, something flickering across her face, regret, maybe, or just the performance of it. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted money more than you wanted to be a mother. I know. You taught me that lesson very well. Carol's voice was calm. But here's the thing I finally understand. You didn't destroy me. You just showed me clearly what I never wanted to become. And what's that? Someone who measures love in dollars and relationships in transactions. Someone who takes instead of builds. Someone who poisons every good thing rather than admit she's afraid of actual connection. Carol stood. You taught me what love shouldn't be. For that, and only that, I'm grateful. You'll end up alone, Celeste said, voice carrying the particular cruelty of people who've lost everything. You and your precious integrity. No one actually chooses the moral high ground when it's cold and lonely up there. Carol smiled faintly. Then I'll be alone, but I'll still be able to look at myself in the mirror. You'll be surrounded by these walls and still alone with what you did. That's the difference. She left without looking back, feeling lighter with each step, understanding that closure didn't require her mother's acknowledgement or apology, just Carol's own decision to stop waiting for either. Outside, spring sun painted the parking lot gold. Ethan leaned against his car, wearing jeans instead of his usual suit, looking less like a billionaire and more like someone who'd spent 6 months learning to be human again. You waited, Carol said. I told you I would. He straightened. How do you feel? Like I finally returned something that wasn't mine to carry. She moved toward him, stopping a respectful distance away. They'd been learning this dance, figuring out how close felt safe. She tried to make me feel guilty, predict my lonely future. Classic Celeste. And I realize she's wrong. I'm not alone. I'm just finally choosing to be around people who love me without calculating the cost. Carol looked at him. Thank you for waiting, for showing up even when I don't know if we're rebuilding toward romance or just rebuilding toward being whole people who share history. You saved me, Ethan said quietly. Even after what I did, you saved my foundation, my reputation, my... No, Carol interrupted gently. I saved myself. I chose truth over comfort, integrity over revenge, building over destroying. You were just smart enough to stop running and start learning. She paused. But you saved yourself too, by facing what you did, by not making excuses, by finally choosing honesty even when it was terrifying. He reached for her hand, a question, not a demand. She took it. What happens now, he asked. Now we drive away from here. Now we stop letting my mother's choices define our story. Now we figure out whether two people who survived betrayal can build something honest from the wreckage. And if we can't, then we'll still be people who tried, who chose truth, who learned that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up honestly even when it's hard. She squeezed his hand. That's not failure. That's just being human. They drove away together as dawn painted the horizon. Not as billionaire and designer, not as victim and perpetrator, but as two people who'd been broken by betrayal and chosen to rebuild themselves with integrity instead of bitterness. The road stretched ahead, uncertain and promising. Carol looked out the window at landscape transforming from prison gray to spring green, and whispered words that felt like both ending and beginning. Her mother stole my heart, my lover, and my peace, but I took back my power, and that shocked them both. Ethan glanced at her. You're not shocked anymore, are you? No. Carol smiled genuinely, without performance or protection. I'm just finally free, and that's better than any revenge could ever be. They drove toward morning, toward possibility, toward lives rebuilt from honesty instead of illusion. The past receded in the rearview mirror, not forgotten, but finally given permission to be history instead of prison. Some betrayals taught you by breaking you. Some loves healed by forcing you to rebuild yourself stronger. Some mothers showed you exactly who not to become. And Carol Santos, designer, survivor, daughter of a woman who'd chosen greed over grace, finally understood. Taking back your power didn't require destroying the people who hurt you. It just required choosing yourself with the same fierce love you'd been giving everyone else. That was the real shock. That was the real victory. That was enough.